Nick is the creative mind behind one of the most impressive works of kinetic new media arts I've ever seen. The piece is called Morph, and it's truly a genius mix of form, motion, light, and sound. I saw the work come through my social media feeds, and I immediately wanted to get in touch. Our conversation was mostly about the creative process. I wanted to understand how Morph went from concept to reality. Him and his team were hired by a group out of Austria to produce the piece for a gallery show in a renovated castle. The final setting for this could not be a better contrast to their high-tech installation. His co-creators developed the software used to drive the light, motion, and sound, and they're geniuses in their own right. I definitely look forward to meeting them as well. They all came together in Berlin, and they worked out of a makerspace called MotionLabs to finish the build. Definitely check out their portfolio page before you listen to this episode so you get a sense of the project that we're talking about. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Yeah, dude, I'm stoked. I'm stoked to have like a longer conversation with you and find out more about Morph, really.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, same.
So you're back in Australia now, and you're through
Yep.
quarantine, is that right?
Yeah, I had 14 days quarantine. It was pretty boring. And now I'm straight back into lockdown here.
Fuck.
So slightly
Yeah,
more
man.
freedom, but not much.
Well, I've been reading news articles about people getting hyphy all over the place in Australia. I
Yeah,
mean,
everyone's
it's
getting
the
a
same
bit
thing everywhere,
antsy.
pretty much.
Sorry?
It's the same thing everywhere, pretty much. The United
Yeah.
States, like anywhere, France, anywhere there's a lockdown, people are like, "Fuck you."
Pretty much. Yeah, hopefully all this vaccination stuff helps something out. It's getting a bit crazy.
Yeah. So, what's the story with vaxes in Australia? Are you guys pretty like? Is vaccination like? What percentage are you guys in terms of percentage of population vaxxed?
I think fully is like 20 to 30 um, percent. I think that's like picking up pretty quickly now, but it was a really slow rollout. It's been a pretty hot topic in politics and all that sort of stuff. But
Oh yeah, I'm
seems
sure.
like seems like it's starting to happen. But there's like people want to get it, but they can't. There's just not enough.
Really?
But
So
it seems like that's ramping up for sure.
yeah. So it is an access issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because in the United States we have plenty of vaccines, and half of the country doesn't want to take them. Half of the country is
Yeah.
like, ah, this is a fucking microchip. Kind of crazy,
Yeah.
man. Like
Yeah, I
it
mean,
really
my
does.
microchip's sitting in my right pocket, so
Yeah, yeah. It's like firmware bugs in the human brain. You know what I mean? It's like the more advanced people get, it's like all of these things. You're like, whoa, man, this is like people are prone to conspiracy theories. You know what I mean? People are prone to this way of thinking, and it's totally like the fucking monkey brain coming back and
yeah,
like not knowing how to deal with modern
yeah,
society.
yeah. It's like it's both just equally disturbing and also entertaining in many ways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, fuck. Well, yeah, here we are.
Common sense seems to be prevailing most of the way, which is good.
Yeah. So it looks like you've got like your workshop all set up behind you.
Yeah, this is sort of where it started. Not started. It all started in my bedroom while I was at university, but since then I've moved to a place with a garage
Yeah,
and set up a
it was
little
very
shop.
organized.
Yeah, I mean that it's usually temporarily that way. I can give
Yeah.
you a bit of a look. That's actually the old one, old
Oh
Morph.
shit. Yeah, yeah.
There's
Interesting.
a printer and just tools and a CNC machine.
Well, it's funny how it's like your it's like your background. Everybody's got a different Zoom background, and some people do the fake Zoom background, but then some people just like clean up their environment as best as possible, and then have whatever. Your Zoom background is very appropriate. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like a nice, tidy workshop.
Yeah, I mean, I try and keep it tidy. I'm gonna have to pack it up soon because I'm gonna try and go back to Germany. But yeah, I've always wanted a space like this. yeah, finally got it, and now I have to move out. But
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, hopefully on to bigger and better things soon.
yeah. Yeah, well that's cool. So you're headed back to Germany then. That's the plan, is to go back to Europe and continue working with that same group of people, same crew?
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. It's not super clear what's going to happen with the next, like where the next project's going to come from or whatever. But I mean, that's the intention.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
one of them is back here in Australia because he's just had a kid, so he'll probably be sticking around for a little while. But the other guy, I don't know. We'll see. But we work pretty well remotely anyway, so we'll
That's cool. I
just
mean, I think
yeah,
everybody does, man. We're in this mode where like you can really work with people wherever.
yeah,
Especially on things like design, like in the design phase of a project.
yeah. And that's what
Is
we did initially when we first landed this project, because they were both in Europe at the time, and I was here. So
yeah,
before we'd signed anything, we'd started work, doing design and talking about all the features and all that, and it worked. I mean, it was a bit weird with the time zones, but it worked pretty well.
yeah,
And realistically, I'm the only one who really needs to sort of tie down into a set location for a fixed point once things actually get going, because I've actually got to build the things. But apart
yeah.
from that, these guys are pretty mobile.
That's cool. So let's describe this project for people, because I've been looking at it. I saw it on Facebook, actually, of all places, and I was just like, "What the fuck is that?" It's an orb. It's kinetic, so it's a faceted orb
Hmm.
made of many tiled hexagons,
Yeah,
and it it the the hexagons protrude in and out on the z-axis, and then
yeah,
they're also illuminated. So it's this like moving, rippling, glowing orb. It's just one of the most unique pieces I've ever seen, but it's also super. It's like elegant. It's very simple and elegant. I mean, it's very complicated, but it looks, visually, it looks simple. It makes sense visually.
yeah.
But where did this concept come from? Like, how did this idea come about? And yeah, like, what was the seed?
I guess the seed was maybe like 6 years ago when I'd done it was basically an introductory course to electronics at university. It was just a semester elective, and I discovered, okay, this is pretty cool. And that was the seed to start to get involved with electronics. And then I discovered that I could use motors and LEDs, and I quickly became pretty fascinated by the concept of tangible media,
Mm-hmm.
coming out of, I think it was a concept coming out of MIT. And they had a bunch of really cool precedents for that. So
Is
initially I
that
was trying to
the
just
media?
make my
Is
own.
that the media lab? The
Yeah,
MIT Media
MIT
Lab?
Media Lab. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So initially I had my own ideas for like just planar stuff, quite similar, but I was really wanting to look more at the surface of that and the textures and materials that you could use. Um, and then, like, I guess I always had that in my mind, but then it wasn't. And I did another course after that where I built another one, which is a little bit bigger, but still kind of crappy. And it wasn't until a few years later where I met Josh, one of the other guys in the MindBuffer guys. So it's Josh and Mitch, and he was my supervisor for my honors project. And I didn't know what I was going to do for that project, but um, basically ended up pursuing this because I was just looking at like applications for tangible media and these sort of physical interfaces between data and humans beyond
yeah.
the mouse and the keyboard. Um, but I knew I couldn't go for some like super practical application, so that's when I diverged to the more artistic application for it. Um, Using the research that I'd already done, because that
So
allowed a bit
just
more freedom to make things bigger and not so functional. And I've
was
got a
Josh
background
was
in
the
art as well. Say
Josh
again,
was
sorry.
the Josh was the programmatic side of is he doing the programming for this piece?
So yeah, Josh Batty, Dr. Batty, that's his real name, and Mitchell Nordin. So Josh was my supervisor, but they've been a duo, I guess, called MindBuffer for about 10 years. And they started off doing electronic music. They're actually classically trained musicians, but eventually they wanted to build their own own instruments and tools, and that sort of led them down the rabbit hole of programming.
Isn't it
And as a
crazy,
result,
man, how
yeah,
like electronic musicians, right?
yeah,
Those tools lend themselves so readily to generative light patterns. Like some of the most amazing light pattern
yeah.
programming I've ever seen
I
comes
think,
from tools that are essentially
yeah,
LFOs, and
yeah,
it's the
absolutely,
same tool. It's like creating these patterns that resonate with your brain,
yeah,
and that can be expressed visually or auditorily, but
hmm
it's like the waveforms and the patterns, and your brain just like it makes intuitive sense. And when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the video of this thing on the Augment L website. How do you say it? Augmental.
augmental.
Yeah, Augmental website, and it's just like the programming is fucking genius, man. Like it is an
It's really,
amazing
yeah,
machine,
yeah,
but the way that patterns flow across this thing is beautiful. It's art, It's like mathematical art.
yeah. And there's like insane amounts of maths in there. I mean, I think both of them are doing far more maths. I mean, even I was doing far more maths than I ever thought I would. Hated maths at school. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I think just programming in general, if you're coming from a musical background, particularly electronic music, is just like such an ideal sort of entry into it. And you could, because you have these appreciations also for timing as well,
Hmm.
and for precision and speed
Yeah.
that may not come from elsewhere. And I think that was really key in this project because there's so much data pumping through this thing, and it's all happening in real time.
Yeah.
And so you've got to like hit the mark all the time and manage your memory, and like everything has to be super precise. So it worked out really well. I mean, I think if you're looking for like programmers and stuff, like if they've come from that direction, super useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, like most of the stuff that we do is very abstract. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of contextual content that we use in our pieces. And I'm just looking at this and being like, it would be cool to work with both you guys, or both sides of your team
Yeah. Yeah.
in different you know different capacities. So yeah, so you're back to Germany. You're gonna link up and try and continue working on. I'm sure that people are gonna see this, man, and you're gonna get requests for other similar pieces without a doubt. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
this thing is too iconic not to generate um, additional projects.
Yeah, so yeah, hopefully, but we'd love to build more and new and different things, and yeah, which sort of there's some interest there, but we're just managing all that. And I mean, the tricky thing about them is this sort of installation. I mean, as you would know, is it's very expensive, and sometimes it's hard to get people over the line to go ahead with the project. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
generally we've had a really good response from it.
yeah, I think that it's in the end, it is hard to sell complex art with cutting edge technology because it is so expensive. But I think
Mm,
that there's opportunity to do that. You just have to connect with the right groups, and
yeah.
as as your company grows, you'll find that easier, and people will find you really. Um, but just the principles behind this piece, it's kinetic, and it's incredibly seamless, and it's very well programmed. Like the illumination is really elegant, and I think that
Mhm.
those concepts, you don't have to do the same thing twice. In fact, maybe it's best not to do the same thing twice, but taking the principles of, the design principles that went into this,
Mm.
and carrying them on to other form factors and other other applications. um they're universal principles in terms
Yeah,
of build, and build quality,
yeah,
and
yeah,
the
absolutely.
yeah.
And that's what really excites us about it is, I mean, I guess the success of this is due to a lot of the modularity behind it, both, I mean, programmatically and physically.
Yeah.
And this whole project, I mean, once it got to that stage where I was doing the research project, the project was the thing, like the module. And then
You're
just
talking
the
about
idea
like
that,
the individual hexagon, the kinetic hexagon was
yeah,
the module. And that, I mean,
well,
obviously
yeah, we
this,
call that a node now, but
yeah.
because there's more modularity within the larger sphere. But
Hmm.
yeah, that was the whole goal, was to make this thing that you could scale effectively infinitely, given that you've got the right, data overheads and stuff. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I'm
and
just
yeah,
like,
I mean that sort of developed even further into the whole system-wide build as well.
yeah, yeah. That's cool. So this thing lives in some artist's castle. Where
Yeah.
is it, like, say is in the Netherlands or something, or
So it's in Austria, in a place
yeah.
called St. Veit, and it's fairly. I mean, I'm not from Austria, but to me, it's fairly remote. It's about 4 hours south on a train from Vienna, so it's right,
Man,
right
I'm
along the
looking at
border.
this. I'm looking at this castle, and I'm just like, all I can think of is like Count Dracula with a hard on for new age, new media tech.
Yeah, man,
I'm
it's
like,
super strange, but
who
it's
is this
like
guy?
so beautiful. And that's like, one of hundreds of castles in the area, because it's such an ancient. There's so much history in the area, and then you've just got this like.
So my ex partner lives in Barcelona, and she was telling me, she was like, her and a group of friends found out that somehow that in like France they're giving away castles, but you have to commit to 10 years of improvement on these things, and you have to put in like X number of dollars in of like capital improvements into these ancient structures. But they'll give you a castle, but you have to
That's
do
pretty
something with
cool.
it. Yeah. And I'm just like, you hear about it. It's like, yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of castles in Europe, and they're just
Yeah,
like, what? They're just, nothing's happening with them. They're just like sitting there.
yeah. I mean, this one was a ruin for a long time. I think it's from the 12th century, and in its recent history, it's been a ruin for a long time until the last like 10 years or so, and then this guy somehow, I don't know how he came into custody of it, but he spent millions on it, developing it.
Well, they probably gave it to him, but I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe.
in the end, it's a castle. It's just like, dark and made of stone and probably wet inside, leaky.
Hmm.
Essentially, you just got to rebuild the whole thing. There's this
Yeah.
architect in Barcelona. I can't remember his name, but he took a like a it's like a concrete plant or concrete factory, or maybe it was like a grains. I don't know. It was some like series of silos, a very
Hmm.
industrial, abandoned industrial plant, and he turned it. I mean, essentially, it was like, like a mid-century castle, but like an industrial plant, and he turned it into his his gallery, and it's just a beautifully designed um,
Yeah, I think I've come across
home
this one.
studio.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So what's this guy's deal? Did you know him personally? Did he find you guys? Did you get to hang out with him? Was he cool?
So the people approached us. It was Andre Heller, who's a sort of highly acclaimed multimedia artist from way back when
Uh huh.
in Germany and Austria and that sort of region. And I think at one point, I mean, he probably still is a bit of a household name there. We'd not heard of him before, but his manager, I guess, reached out to us, found us, and said that they were interested in curating a piece of ours for the gallery that they were building in this castle. I don't know, the client is. different. So we worked for the artist or the curator for this exhibition,
Yeah.
and then they dealt
And so
with
it's an
the client
exhibition.
who actually owns the castle.
Yeah. So people are going to come through and see this. It is like an exhibition space.
Yeah, yeah. So the client owns a watch brand called Jacques Le Mans, um,
A watch
and
brand?
yeah, it's like
Oh.
a boutique watch brand, I guess. And
Yeah.
this whole thing is like an experience built around this brand, I guess. You can go there, and there's a winery, and so the whole hill's been sculpted uh, in a new way to grow wine. Like you can't usually grow wine in this region, but they sort of just replaced all the topsoil, shaped it, built a
Interesting.
hotel at the bottom, and then just finished the castle here. And then you can go up there, buy some watches, go through the gallery. There's also an opera theater, like a concert hall, and it's all really beautiful. Like it's,
Yeah.
I guess the concept is that you go there for like a nice sort of experience. You do all the activities there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because like this really does it makes a lot of sense for a watch brand. You know,
Yeah,
like the kinetic nature of it is
yeah,
very, you know, it's mechanical. It fits like a with a watch brand. I can see this being like, yeah.
mm. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely still a huge contrast. It's really interesting being in that space. Like you contrasted it between these like super old walls and then this new tech. The whole gallery is all new media installations. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's really interesting approach.
That's very cool, man. It's very cool. So I'm gonna have to go visit Europe now. Go see this
Yeah,
castle.
yeah. I mean, I wish it was easier to do. I mean, I'd love to have more people come and see it. It's a shame that it's so far away, but I
4
think
hours
anyone
in
who
the middle of
does
nowhere.
make the trip would. I mean, it would be totally worth it. It's a beautiful area. It's sort of like
Yeah.
a pilgrimage to go and see the Morph.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're what city are you in Germany? When you go back, when are you going to stay in
Berlin.
Berlin?
Yeah,
Of course. Of course. There's a
yeah. I mean,
lot going
it's
on
a
in
great.
Berlin.
Sorry.
There's a lot going on in Berlin.
Yeah, it's a really awesome spot for this sort of thing. There's a lot of art and a lot of like hard tech startup stuff. There's a great scene for it. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think we could have been as successful as we were if we weren't there, just because there was so much support around, and we were in a makerspace or like a sort of like a makerspace thing there that's based around hard tech startups. So
Yeah.
we had this
Yeah.
whole community of people around us, but we could draw on their knowledge for for things that we weren't sure of, or to make connections in the industry. Yeah, I mean, I think if we did it in isolation or in a different city, even it would have been much harder.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So were you connected with other artists in Berlin, like other groups? You said that you were hanging out with Christopher Bowder of White Void.
Yeah,
Were they involved in the process at all, or?
that was just so one of the founders of um, the makerspace that we were in made that connection with us. I don't know what his connection is with him, but basically they were touring the space we were in and said hello one day, and then basically said, "Oh, come see this, come see the demo of it when it's done," and he did, and was impressed. So yeah, I mean, it's the perfect place for this because there's so many people doing the same sort of things, and then they just sort of walk past you, and you're like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah, yeah, that's cool, man. Makerspaces are so cool. It's like they're such a necessary ingredient for the scene. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
this, they're like a physical venue where people of like mind can mix, and share ideas. And there's not a lot of other, outside of like a university setting. There's not a lot of other
yeah,
places like
absolutely.
makerspaces and makerspaces can be really informal. You know, Like
Yeah.
they're the lab, they're the incubator, but they're also informal, so you can just kind of hang out and meet people.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this was. It's a really cool community there, and everyone's equally crazy and doing weird things, and it's just a proper melting pot of different skills and backgrounds.
Yeah, yeah.
It's good to you can
Man,
just like if you're frustrated with a problem, you can just walk out and have a chat or coffee with someone, or and maybe they'll have like the perfect solution for you, or or even just a good opportunity to take a break.
yeah. Well, my previous business partner is actually living in Berlin now. So I got a couch
Mm-hmm.
there. And I've been saying for the past couple months, if it gets smoky here, we have like, this is forest fire season in
Yeah,
California.
right.
And if it gets bad enough, I'll bounce, I'd probably try and head to Berlin at least for a month. Um, the thing is that shit is just really busy right now. We've got a lot of physical projects that are happening, and I feel,
Yeah,
I'm kind of I'm stuck. I'm stuck here trying to manage these projects, and it's a good thing because they're really exciting projects. But at the same
mm.
time, my hopes and dreams of bouncing to Germany for a month are, you know, it's
Yeah,
getting
it
more
can
difficult.
make it tricky to travel.
Yeah,
The sort
exactly.
of projects that really lock you down. So,
Well, I mean, I think what we do is there's two phases. There's a
mm,
virtual design phase, right? Where it's
yeah.
very much like you can do that remotely. You can work with teams all over the world, etc. And then there's a build phase, which is very, you have to be present. You have to be there in the in the location, and
Mm.
yeah, it's I look at my friends who work remotely, and they're all like, yeah, peace. We're moving to Tahoe, and we're gonna climb rocks and you know fucking ski all year. I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. I just can't because so much of what you know our studio is a physical. We build things, and it's hard to get away.
Yeah, it's one of those trade-offs. I guess you could choose like the really rock solid 9 to 5. You get the holidays here, here, and here, and your
Oh,
weekends
fuck
there, there,
that.
and there,
No,
or you
definitely not doing
do
that.
crazy cool stuff that just excites you every day, and then but sometimes the trade-off I guess we have is you just gotta lock yourself in for a little while and finish it.
Yeah, it's funny too because like 9 to 5 seems really relaxing. You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah,
if you own a business, you're like 9 to 5. Wow, those hours are so sane.
yeah, right.
you
But
know?
at the same time, if you've ever been there for a long time in a place where you don't like it, it's just like, oh man, it's mind numbing.
Oh my god, no, I could never do a 9 to 5.
Yeah,
Doesn't I don't think I'm employable in that way, really. But I mean, I'm just saying it to not have the responsibility, can be very
Mhm.
attractive sounding, at least for a little while. But yeah, no,
Yeah. I
I
mean, I
love.
do miss aspects of it, but many of it I really don't miss.
Yeah, man. The thing is, dude, it's like I don't think that you'll ever have to do that.
Yeah.
With the skill set that you have, you might get sick of freelancing because it's hard. It really sucks sometimes because it's just like a nonstop hustle. Um, However, you don't have to. Like you could
Mm,
easily freelance forever. You could easily just be involved in cool projects from one to the next for your
mm.
entire career, and it would be fine. But you are always hustling. I was actually just talking to the last guy that I talked to on this podcast. We're actually working on a project now, um, Bill Galusha, and he is like a career director. He does like creative direction for new media arts projects, and he's really good at what he does. And we were talking, and he's just like, man, I'm sick of the hustle. Like I would love to just be hired by one of these studios and just have that stability. So it is a trade off. It's a trade off between the excitement of being like, oh, I could go anywhere and do anything with any company,
Yeah,
and being
yeah.
like, oh, fuck, that means I have to find anywhere with any company all the time.
Yeah, I still haven't figured out what's better, but I don't know. I mean, either way, even just any sort of work in this industry, I think we've landed in a really cool space.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when you were in Germany, when you were hanging out at the makerspace, like what other groups were there? Like who else did you come into contact with, and what were they doing? What were some of the other cool projects that you saw?
I mean, there's all sorts. I think the place is called MotionLab in Berlin, and they are. I mean, I would say usually geared more towards mobility startup projects.
Mobility.
Um,
I'm looking them up right now. Actually, I'm just googled them.
yeah, it's a cool spot. So that's like, I mean, any sort of mobility could be like in terms of disability or even uh, uh, cycling, cars, all that sort of
Oh my
startup
god,
stuff.
it's your sphere. Your sphere is on their website.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's not limited. There's all sorts of people in there making some really cool stuff. Like a friend of mine's making uh, prosthetics that are accessible to third world countries,
Yep.
so anyone can afford them, and it's an amazing product. There's people doing um, art, some kinetic art for festivals, kind of uh, almost similar, but much simpler and more elegant than what we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, and then, I mean, what else is there? People printing with clay, uh, people making uh, like mobility aids for injuries, but they're like fluid actuated, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I'm looking at their homepage, and I saw it's like a flat sheet of what looks like some kind of like porous material, and they're pumping air into it, and that forms like
Yeah,
a grid shape in the fabric. Super cool,
yeah, it's
man.
like soft robotics, but applied to prosthetics almost.
Yeah, I
It's
was
a really
reading
interesting
about that, man. That's
project.
so a lot of like biotech, like essentially like nanoscale medical machines work on those principles, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like mechanical pumps, and
yeah,
that's how they create motion. Super fascinating.
yeah. It's really cool.
Man, I love the bus. I've just got like a bus parked in the middle of the space.
Yeah, it's super random,
It's
but
cool
it's
though.
pretty iconic. I mean, there's people's artworks or projects or finished products everywhere. So you've got inspiration everywhere you walk. It's really cool. There's inspiring people, but also inspiring products and art everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a really good, nice space to encourage creativity.
You
And then
think you're
there's
gonna go back?
also,
Well, is that where you're gonna work out of if you go back to Berlin?
yeah, probably. The other good thing about it is they've got quite a lot of equipment, so like CNCs, lasers, electronics lab. Um, so you don't have to lash out for the larger stuff. You can just figure out your own smaller hand tools, and they have hand tools as well. But the good thing about it is you can build your own. I mean, if you've got a space, it's got the space is at a premium. But if you've got a space, you can build your own sort of workshop within this workspace, and then still have access to these amazing tools and facilities. And it's
Yeah.
really flexible,
Like,
which
what do
is
you
I
mean?
guess
In
what
what way?
encourages so many people to go there.
Just like hours, and you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a 24-hour facility. You get access whenever you want, and then just got to do your inductions on the equipment, and you can use it whenever you want.
That's
And
super cool.
there's all sorts of printers as well, including like SLA, massive WASP, Delta printers.
Wow.
Yeah,
So, did
there's
you
like
find that the machines were well calibrated? A lot of the maker spaces that I've come across, it's like the machines are great, but like people use them all
yeah,
the time, and they just get they get sloppy. The machines themselves get kind of loose.
yeah, they definitely cop a real beating.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, The more critical stuff, I would say, if people really need it, they get it themselves if they're using it like super frequently. But the other stuff that's available there is definitely good enough to push out prototypes, and they're always working on them. They don't stay broken for very long if they do break, which is really good.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's
yeah, they're
cool.
definitely cup of beating when you got hundreds of people using them every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the challenge here in the Bay Area. We had like a couple maker spaces, and well, there was like a franchise, and essentially it went under because I don't know exactly why. I mean, I'm sure it was financial, but they just couldn't pay the rent. San Francisco is an insane city in terms of rent. Um, I wonder now, after like rent has come down significantly in the city, and I wonder now if it would be easier for a space like that to exist. Berlin is special because
Mm.
I know it's gentrifying, and I understand that rent is
Mm.
going up, but it's still, you can have there's a lot more space, first of all, in Berlin than there is in San Francisco, between East and West Berlin. And then there's a lot more empty spaces that are just kind of like cheap.
Yeah, I mean, it still seems super tricky to find spaces, particularly now with the gentrification of things. But I agree, it's a pretty unique place where I don't know. It seems like a better ecosystem to start something like this. It's like if you can get the space, it's a lot easier to maintain it, maybe. But
Yeah,
I mean, I know they're having trouble with almost growing too quickly. They need more space, but
right.
finding it in the like inner city is tricky. There's definitely some. I mean, there's all sorts of massive old abandoned warehouses everywhere, but not all of them are super easy to get.
Yeah, and I'm sure not all of them are suited for every type of application.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
what they've
you
got
guys
works
did
really
most of
well.
say that again?
So what they've got works really well.
Yeah, you're talking about MotionLab.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, it seems like they've got their shit dialed. And that's awesome, man. It seems like a real hub for the community, and that's really
Mm.
cool. So you'd say that the new media art scene is very alive, and I mean, like, I know it is, but you experienced the new media art scene was very alive and well in Berlin.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not necessarily just in that place. There's a few artists there, but um, I mean, you can just throw a stone and hit some of the greatest electronic musicians ever, and some of them are doing new media art as well to augment their projects.
I was just listening
And
to a podcast, and it was all about the birth of the techno scene
yeah,
in Berlin, and how it actually
yeah,
went hand in hand with the techno scene in Detroit, and how there were two cities in a similar socioeconomic place back in,
yeah,
like, really post Berlin Wall. So it was like right when synthesizers were becoming available, like analog synthesizers were becoming cheap, widely available, and people were experimenting with them. And at the same time, the warehouse spaces, like the Berlin Wall fell, and all of a sudden there was just a flood of empty warehouse space in
yeah,
East
yeah,
Berlin, and people who were throwing these parties were like, they were able to advance the scene because they had physical space to host these. It's very similar to the makerspace scene. It's like
mm,
when you have um, like an interest, like a group of people interested in a common subject. You need a physical space to facilitate that interest and to
yeah,
foster that community. Without physical space, it's very hard to do that. And now we can do that online. It's becoming easier to do that virtually,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I still think that there needs to be a commons. There needs to be a place or a hub where people can gather, hang out, and socialize in person, and share ideas.
Yeah, I think that personal aspect's really important. Like, it's of course you can get work done remotely, but I don't know. There's that personal aspect adds a bit more weight to the ideas that are being thrown around because you can like you can discuss it and you don't have to schedule that discussion or whatever. It just happens, and then you're like, oh, I'll go back and I've had an idea or whatever.
Well,
We
that's
had, we had
the
people walking in, whatever. We're pretty open workshops, so it's
yeah,
just like
yeah.
always ideas flowing around, and that's sort of only really available when people are physically present. That flow, I guess.
Yeah. It's funny, man. That's what I'm struggling with that now because
Mm,
there are all these people all over the world that I want to work
mm,
with. You know what I
mm.
mean? But at the same time, when it comes to like actually building things and installing things, it's like I don't know how to do that with people who aren't here. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's like I
yeah,
need to figure out a way to bridge that gap so that yeah, I mean maybe it's just like so we have this amazing space here called the Lumen Labs, and
uh,
it's kind of a it is a maker space, but it's like an artist community. But
mm-hmm.
there's it's like not only is it a lab space, place to build and work and offices, but it's also it's people can stay here. They can like sleep, post up and like be here for weeks at a time. Um, and maybe that's part of the solution is having, like hosting artists from other places, and just like hosting people for like a couple weeks or a couple months or whatever it is. And then,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, allowing them to
yeah.
be
I mean,
here.
hopefully we can get that sort of movement happening, like actually being able to travel a bit more freely. So I
Well, I think that
think,
you can absolutely do that. I mean, I think that,
yeah,
well, you could also do that in Berlin where you host people in Berlin. I mean, because
mm,
space is cheaper there. We
mm,
lucked out, man. This space is cheap and it allows us to do what we do. Um, yeah. Physical
yeah,
space is really important. People working with each other in person, super important.
yeah, definitely, especially when you're building things. I mean, I think even just in general, it's even if you do most of your work remotely, there's just got to be a point where you come together and actually interact face to face to work out problems.
Yeah. So your team, you said one of them was back in Australia,
Yeah,
and then there's another guy who's in Berlin.
he's in Spain at the moment.
Oh shit! So you're
He'll,
remote no matter what. You guys can be working remotely regardless.
yeah, I mean, we had no reason to sort of be together once this project finished because it wasn't like one directly after. So, I mean, there's every chance that we might, regroup at some point when new projects come up. But, for the work that we need to do together now, it's not really required to be all in one place.
Yeah,
And we can do our own projects and all that sort of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, what definitely being together with them in this space was super useful when we were, right, going really hard on it because it just gives you so much agility. You get to, just have discussions and solve problems there and then.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and we were really really working super closely because every decision, even though we were working on, I guess, very separate components of it, every decision was very interrelated.
yeah. So tell me about the process of building Morph. Like, what?
Yeah.
How long was the entire build?
So originally we only had a deadline of like 4 months, something insane like that. And we were fully prepared to try and do that and probably to
Yeah,
kill ourselves in the process.
I was gonna say, man,
But
that seems ambitious.
yeah, but then the project was getting pushed back from the client side anyway because of COVID stuff. So then we got until February. Unfortunately, we'd already been working to that deadline, so we'd made a lot of decisions that probably could have used a little bit more time in the oven. Um, but yeah, I mean, um, we just set this basically when we started. We just dropped this calendar on a whiteboard, and it was the craziest looking thing you've ever seen. Basically, we're just doing like massive milestones every single day to
Yeah,
get things done. And the only thing really that was slowing us down was like supply issues from various suppliers or fabricators or whatever.
dude, it's crazy, right? It's like
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, can I get simple shit like LED chips? Like, can
Yeah.
I get them? It's a real problem, man, and it's almost like the only thing that could fuck the the progress that we're making right now and like how we're growing is like, well,
Mm.
what if I can't get stuff like LED chips? That would end the party real quick.
Yeah, we almost missed out on a motor driver chip because like I mean it was in stock all the time. I was doing all the ECAD design, but then as soon as we went to order, they're all gone everywhere. We were like, fuck, fuck, fuck. It's like super critical component because we've done all this design work for it. Um, and then luckily we found one place that had just enough. So we had to buy
Right.
it and then ship it to the PCB manufacturer in China.
Yeah.
But
So
the also,
you
I
ship
mean,
them, you ship the parts to the assembly house.
for this particular component, because we couldn't get it anywhere else, and they
Yeah.
couldn't get it either.
Yeah.
But the biggest challenge was just like one, people not living up to their word and doing things on time, but also just it was super strange, like begging people to take your money in the first place,
Right.
like justifying that your project is real. Please treat it seriously. Let me give you the money to actually buy the components. It was really
Interesting.
weird
So who are
dynamic, and
you
I think
who are you running? That's really interesting.
yeah,
I've had similar problems. Just people taking you seriously, right?
yeah. I mean, I think
So were you
as soon as you put art in front of it, everyone was just like.
interesting. So were you running into that with the manufacturing companies, or who specifically was giving
Suppliers
you?
generally,
Yeah.
um, particularly if we were trying to keep it within Germany. I think part of that would have been because we don't none of us speak any German, but we were able to find plenty of people who spoke it within these companies. Um,
What
I don't know.
what parts were you sourcing in Germany?
So we wanted to source the stepper motors in Germany, even though they would have been made in China, but just so we could have, there was quite a critical component. We wanted it to be reliable. We found a supplier that was within a reasonable price range, but then we had to bail
Yeah.
on them because they, for months and months, they were saying, "Yeah, we can do this within 4 or 6 weeks or whatever." Then we go to actually place an order, and it was a month before we got a reply after just like incessantly bugging them. And then
Wow.
as soon as then when we got a reply, they're like, "Oh no, actually, that timeline's not going to work. It'll be done in February if you like," which is the project deadline.
Right.
So that really screwed us over in a big way. And then we made a bad decision and went with a Chinese supplier that we hadn't really vetted yet. And as a result, we've got like 600 motors that we couldn't use because they
Oh,
have poor tolerance issues and they're
yeah.
really wobbly. So we had to find another German company that actually imports Chinese motors as well, but they were a bit more consistent. We could actually talk to someone in the country, and they could fit the timeline. So it was hell, really, but we eventually got there. And the rest of the stuff we tried to just order it mainly from places where you can actually order online. As soon as we had to hit some sort of like customer service barrier, it was like literally like a brick wall trying to go through it. You
Because you
couldn't
didn't
have
speak
just like
German.
money taped to yourself and they still wouldn't talk to you.
You just didn't speak the language. Is that what it came down to?
I mean, in Berlin in particular, you can always find someone who speaks the language. It was more just being taken seriously as like, or just being treated with any sort of urgency. I think maybe they're used to projects happening over a longer timeline, which is fair enough. I mean, we were really sprinting really hard. So, I mean, we were just sort of like trying to pull everyone along with us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I
I think
guess
that
the
like
language thing was tricky in the sense that they I think take you more seriously if you are speaking the language.
Of course. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
there's a language barrier is real, and it goes way
yeah,
beyond language. Like language is the communication of ideas.
yeah,
Fundamentally, it's the transmission of ideas. And if, each language is like a lens that
mm,
colors that transmission. And
mm,
yeah, if you don't speak the same language, there's a fundamental difficulty in transmitting like basic concepts, because the intonation and the
yeah,
yeah, shit gets lost in translation. Like a nuance gets lost
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
translation. And we have problems with that with our Chinese suppliers, and it's taken us years of working with these suppliers to form a solid foundation of communication, where even though they
mm,
don't English, or they don't we don't speak Mandarin, they don't speak very fluent English,
yeah,
they know what we're saying, they know what we mean when we say certain things
yeah,
as it relates to their product, right? So it's like, yeah, that takes time. And if you don't have time, you don't have established suppliers, yeah, man, that's a thing that can sink a project.
yeah. I think we came very close on a number of occasions to that sinking us. Going forward, I think we would definitely have at least someone full time or on call who can speak and write in German. If we're going to build other
Yeah,
projects in Germany, I think it would be like a critical, like, and then like a very fluent speaker, because none of us could learn it in as much enough detail to get to that point.
oh, of course. Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like somebody at the maker space, you could have been like, hey,
yeah,
homie, we need you to be our like
yeah. I mean,
liaison.
we did that on a few occasions if we needed phone calls made for more urgent stuff. And it was definitely useful. It made things happen a bit much smoother when you did, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you don't want to like bother everyone to be a translator and stuff
No, then
if
well,
you're not paying
at a
them or
certain
something.
point, you got to be like, you're on the team now. You're
Yeah,
hired.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So in the end, how long was the full project? You said it was supposed to be 4 months, but it ended up taking how long?
So we installed it on 20th of February, I think. Um, so I guess that was like 6 months ish.
That sounds, yeah, to do something completely new of that complexity, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
I mean, I think we could have done maybe made some slightly better design decisions if we had that 6 months up front. But at the same time, like, you need to light the fire up your backside so you can get moving. So it was
Yeah,
useful
yeah,
in that sense, and it made
yeah,
us really get like a lot of work done in a very short period of time.
yeah, yeah,
But I think, yeah, looking back, I think it's like a fairly reasonable time frame. Now that we have done a lot of the groundwork, we had to build a lot of stuff from scratch. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
I wouldn't I
most of
wouldn't
the
I would try
physical,
not to agree to 4 months again. That's for sure.
yeah, of course. So the physical frame for that thing was all 3D printed. Is that right?
So there's a steel base sort of platform, I guess, and then bolted to that is an aluminium post, and then there's like a aluminium subframe that's all folded aluminium components, and that's like
I saw that. It's almost like one of those expanding spheres. Everything's like this.
yeah, like a
It's like
Hoberman sphere.
a Hoberman sphere. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's like a what is it? Tetrahedron sort of shape. A icosahedron. Um,
Buckyball.
yeah. So they're conveniently because the outer shape is it's called a dual geodesic icosahedron, and it's pattern number something something. But conveniently, the corners of an icosahedron meet up with the 12 pentagons that you have to have within this shape.
Yeah,
So that was like the center point for the modularity of the whole system.
yeah.
So it's basically you can divide this whole thing into 12 symmetrical parts.
Yep, yep.
And then so the outer shell that's 3D printed. The bit that
Okay.
looks like the buckyball.
Now, do you think that could have existed without that aluminum subframe? It had to have the Hoberman sphere in the center, yeah?
Um, I think it would have been strong enough if you could have somehow miraculously built it and plonked it on a post. Like it has a lot of strength, but one of the key reasons you need it is for just the assemblability, like the buildability of it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
And we're also, like this thing is super technologically dense. There's like layers and layers and layers of stuff. So it was like a really useful point to attach things to. So you could have your core systems in a subframe and wire all your main bus lines and put your Ethernet switches in there. And then basically to put the rest of it on, you just there's 2 power connections and an Ethernet line. And then off you go.
I like to judge the complexity of projects based on zip tie count.
Oh man,
It's like
thousands.
how many zip ties are in that thing? That's the real
I
question.
went through at least like a few bags of 1,000 of those little ones.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I
So I
love how
recommend.
every fucking hexagon in there is its own controller. That's
Yeah,
really impressive, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why it's so smooth. Like the
yeah,
animations are so smooth because you're literally just you're triggering controllers. It's a very distributed model.
yeah. We tried to see if we could. I mean, obviously, we explored a lot of options because the original one was like a very crude, but actually quite similar in the end to the approach that we ended up taking. Um, but we were looking at ways where we could do a lot of this communication from like a more central point. So say like have a single controller per 41 nodes or something instead of one each.
Yeah.
But in the end, and it just made it more complicated, and you needed crazy amounts of power or whatever, or processing power. So I mean, both conceptually and in terms of like assembly and design, from a design perspective, it was way easier to just make them all uh, single units that have their own processing power. And even then, they're doing like a shitload of work. These things are really working hard. Like
Does it get hot?
every cycle is being used.
Does it get hot inside that
They
sphere?
get quite hot, yeah. There's like 60 PC fans sort of blowing outwards. That's probably
Oh
still not
wow.
enough.
So it's
Yeah.
loud. That thing's not quiet.
They're quite quiet. There's like silent nocturnal ones. The loudest thing is actually the power supplies in the base. And I think I could get that down. But it's actually quite a pleasant sound, really. Like even the motors, because you use these silent drivers, and it's sort of like waves crashing on the beach. So like this like whooshy sound,
Well, I'm
not
sure
your
it
traditional stepper
cascades.
sound. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure that the sound of the motor is cascades and they
yeah,
couple
yeah.
together. So it's instead of like me, it's like if you look at how it ripples and you think about
Mm,
what that would sound like, right?
mm.
It would be this like continual transition of like hum across the sphere as those servos as they trigger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It sounds like really pleasing. It's kind of cathartic, I guess.
So I told you that we
The
were
original
working.
one was super loose and shaky and rickety,
Yeah, I
and
saw
it
that
was quite
the
loud.
V1.
But at the same time, you get that same effect where it cascades together and it's sort of nice. But this was
Yeah,
just like a much quieter version of that, a much more controlled version of that. That sounded like really premium. This didn't sound distracting at all. And then as soon as you get the sound involved as well, I mean, it disappears. You don't even notice.
because it's a sonic installation. There's music
Yeah,
involved in it. Ah, see,
yeah,
that's not in the video, man. That's not in the video on your website. I don't think.
yeah.
Or I was,
We need to do something to sort of describe it a little bit better. We're gonna have some more in depth chats about it that will be available soon. But yeah, it's super hard to convey over video because you kind of need to be there. But there's a 5-channel granular synthesizer in there, and that is like a full spatial audio experience. So you have these as the light passes you, so does the sound, and it's really special, and you can't really capture that on
That's
camera.
amazing. Yeah, no, for sure. I want to go, dude. I definitely want to go and check this thing out. I know it's like out in the middle of nowhere, but it's like one of
Yeah.
those things that I would travel. Back in the day when I was younger, I did a it's actually what gave me the idea to do this podcast. I I I traveled through Europe and I just essentially hit up as many new media artists and collectives as I could find. And I was just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. You guys are doing amazing shit. Let's get a beer. And I met so many fucking cool people, dude. But I went and I traveled to every one of them. And that's how I traveled through Europe. And it was really
Nice.
cool. It was like, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. It was a really cool couple of months where I was just like, my destinations in like throughout Europe were just like cool artist collectives.
That's an awesome way to do it.
I mean, everybody, it was cool. Like half the time I was crashing on people's couches, like just other artists' couches. Half the time I was, Airbnb-ing it and then just visiting their studios. But I met so many cool people, man. Like,
Nice.
it was a really amazing trip.
That's awesome. Maybe I have to try that one day.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I didn't have a lot happening at that time. Like I didn't have that many projects happening. There was like in between, two bigger projects. But it was right after the Touch Designer Summit in Berlin.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It was. I can't remember what year that was, but that was a cool year. You ever been to? You ever been to? Are you into Touch Designer at all? Or you? You said that your programming crew use open frameworks. They're just like straight up.
They used to, but now they've written their own framework based in Rust. It's called Nano.
You were telling me about that. So
Yeah.
that's a framework. That's not even like an environment. That's like its own.
It's
Yeah,
like the Rust version of open frameworks, and
okay.
they've developed that from the ground up themselves. So it's not like a UI or anything, but you can do anything in it, and then because it's a more modern language, it's more reliable and faster. It's sort of like the future version of open frameworks, I guess, if you want to go into that really low level stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I can do very basic programming, but if you're gonna compare me to them, then that's like way above the proper programmers.
I've always been like platform agnostic almost. We've used a number of different environments to do our pixel mapping and to write the looks that we display on these installations. It's almost like you can't choose something that is so, or we can't choose something that is so niche and so specific that there's only like a couple people in the world that know how to use it. Because if we do that and we do an installation, like a complex installation with a platform like that, we're hosed if something has to get changed and those people aren't around.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it really is like, if you're going to do something that's standalone, it just sits there and runs, does its own thing, and just it just does its own thing forever, then it's fine. But if you ever want to make changes, or if there's a problem, you can really run into issues by choosing a super like unique and niche platform.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is like if. Yeah, I guess it depends what sort of projects you're doing. With this project, I don't think you could have done it with any sort of out of the box pixel mapper or something. It's just the way that it's written is not like anything that exists right now, because we're using spherical coordinates, not like 2D arrays that are mapped.
No,
These
I
are
agree with
actually
you
like,
100%.
yeah,
I think that
yeah,
maybe I've seen things that are of similar complexity done
mm,
with touch, you know, um, which is
yeah,
not really a program; it's an environment, So yeah,
yeah. I guess with something like Nano, you can create your own environment if any of those are not sort of meeting the needs. That's when you would go there. And I guess the trade off is that you rule out any other programmer unless they're gonna get training on that code or that system.
yeah. Well, you know what
Yeah, it's
what
definitely
would work
tricky.
really well with that paradigm is a one-off marketing installation or something that was happening for like a few days.
Mm,
If you had like an event, like a festival or a stage show, and you designed something similar where it was a very complex physical installation, you could do the programming in a environment like that because it's only going to exist for a short period of time, and once it's done, it's done. It's a moment in time.
yeah, and I guess it comes down to the the requirements for the future access. Like for
Yeah,
us, there's it's quite clear that no one else is going to reprogram this. This isn't just something you can plug your laptop into and have a go at.
right.
But it's very different to many other installations where the client needs access to that to change or to make their own content or to bring in other content creators, which is definitely like another awesome way to do things.
Yeah,
It would be cool if we could make a platform where people can, have, I guess, like a sandbox to play in that is either maybe like compatible with one of those out of the box environments, I guess. I think it's definitely possible. I mean, basically, we just need to translate, their outputs into our inputs.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It seems like you can focus on one of two directions. As
Mm.
as somebody who's developing really unique software, right? You can say, this is my tool, this is part of my art. And my art
Yeah.
is an expression that I use this very custom tool that I built to create this very specific output that is unique to me or my crew and my artist style.
Mm.
Or you can say, I'm going to make a product that I'm going to
Yeah.
then sell to other artists or make available to other artists for them to create their own art. Those are two paths. And I
Yeah.
think
And
that,
equally valid and awesome. I mean, I've seen amazing results from projects where people have intentionally from the get go set out to make this accessible to other content creators, whether they make like a development kit or something for them to create it with or make it accessible with common programs. And it's
yeah.
really awesome to see the stuff people come up with when you sort of give them control of your artwork and then they give their own impression on top of it as well. You can get some amazing results.
Well, then that's the question. It's like, what is
Yeah,
the art? Is the art
yeah,
the
yeah,
output
yeah,
from your tool, or is the art the tool itself?
yeah,
I've talked to a bunch of people on this podcast about that, how like the tool shapes the art, and
hmm,
then the needs of the art shape the tool, and it's this cycle, right? Where it's like in a really successful environment, right? Or like with a successful tool artist ecosystem, it's a feedback loop that continually evolves.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I
It would
think
be
that,
really interesting to see what other people could do it if we could make that abstraction. The tricky
yeah, but
thing
then
is
you
getting,
start dedicating time to
yeah,
making it accessible versus
yeah,
improving the functionality. So it's like, you know, uh, I'm good friends with some guys in Barcelona, or they're not in Barcelona. They'd probably be upset because I told them called them Barcelonians, but their their toolkit is very specific to their artist crew, right? And it's another like musical instrument. They're musicians, and they developed this platform that allows them to create beautiful light patterns through the same set of tools that generate the audio that they express, in their installations.
yeah,
And they have no intention of making that public. That is very much like, that's what enables them to create very unique, specific installations.
Yeah, and that's a. I mean, I didn't think we would make this one public. That all the tools to create it are open source, and you can access like libraries and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, do you let someone appropriate a Picasso painting and just paint over the top of it or something? Like, or is it just like a shared piece? Or
Well,
yeah,
that's the thing. It's like, I think that what you've done, right? I think that Morph, you would never make Morph accessible as a canvas, really. I mean, maybe you would, but it's the software. It's like the screwdriver that you used, or the paintbrush that you used to paint
yeah,
the Picasso. Would
yeah,
you let somebody else use that paintbrush if it was a really special paintbrush?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Super interesting question. I mean, yeah, it seems like such a different thing, but it's also very similar in many ways because yeah, we are creating artworks that aren't intended for people to do anything with.
I think you
And
guys
I
should
guess
just keep on going with. You guys should just keep producing unique pieces of work with that tool.
well, that's the goal.
Yeah,
And I mean, these guys put so much effort into this thing, mostly because it's applicable to all the other things we can do. Basically, if we have an electronic product that can take data, we can now control that in all sorts of crazy ways. So
yeah. Man, I have so many. I like want to
yeah,
talk to you at a later date about a bunch of different projects. I just don't want to do it on this podcast. You
no worries.
know what I mean? But yeah, it's really cool, man. It's super super compelling. Like the system that you guys have created. So you
Yeah,
have
it's really
no idea
exciting for
what's
us.
next, though. There's no that you guys are just kind of gonna see what happens essentially as a crew.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any sort of locked in thing, and I mean, I guess the benefit of being super mobile as we are is we don't have any overheads either. We can be wherever we want.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, this is definitely the whole aim of this thing is to be a bit of a launching point to do bigger and better projects and have more choice in the clients that we choose and all that sort of stuff. So we're not going to rush into anything just for money's sake. To us, the more important thing is to make really cool artworks for our own gain, really. I mean, we didn't. Hopefully, we can make money on future projects, but there was minimal made on this one because it was more like a passion project to get us out there, put us on the map.
yeah. I mean, it's always a trade-off, right? I mean,
Mm,
there's you have to make money to survive, and you also
yeah.
have to make money like as soon as you start to support a crew, right? Like if you have like a crew who's like, you know, they're relying on the projects that you bring
Mm,
in or team brings in order to survive, then all of a sudden you're responsible for people and you have to feed that machine, right? But um, there are lots of projects that we've taken just because they're compelling concepts.
yeah.
In fact, there's a couple projects that we're working on right now where I'm just like, it's almost like I have an idea for an art piece that I want to produce, and there's a client that has, a conference or like whatever. They have a live event and they're like, make me art for me. And they're just like, okay, well, what if we do this? And then when your thing is done, maybe we'll take it home. Maybe we'll display it at our gallery, like who knows? But it's almost like you use as opportunities, as funding sources to just pay for the art. And it's like, all right, well, if the budget is 100x, it's like 100 points, and you spend 95 points to build that fucking art, and you only make 5 points, then whatever. It's
Yeah.
like at least you got to make your thing. And I think that's what you're describing there is like,
Absolutely.
maybe your thing cost 100, you paid, 85 points out of
Yeah,
100
yeah,
to make it.
yeah.
Whatever. You still made the thing, and that's going to be like what defines you as an artist and an artist crew. You got to
Yeah, that
do those.
was super important for us, and we all, I mean, was one of the things we all were really, really well aligned with. Was that we didn't like making money wasn't the goal here. It was making the artwork, and we made a
Yeah.
lot of decisions based on around that we probably didn't have to make. It's definitely not a requirement contractually or even aesthetically or anything to get the thing over the line. But in the end, those decisions built up into this thing that made it like way more epic than we would if we would have just stuck to the very strict brief.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was pretty, you had a lot of creative freedom.
Absolutely, we were really careful with that. Um, I think the client would have had more input if we allowed it. They would have been, but we were pretty clear with that up front, and they were okay with it. They put a lot of trust in us. It was like the
Nice.
ideal client, really, in the end. I mean, we had very few meetings, and when we did, it was just like, this is what we're doing. It was like, it wasn't
Wow.
really a back and forth saying, oh no, you should do this. It was just like, okay, that's cool. So they put a lot of trust in us, and it was really, really cool.
That's awesome.
It
So
was,
was it
yeah.
was it actually like Count Dracula that you were working for, or was it the marketing one that was behind the watches, or like who was the, like, how did that break down? Like, who was the
So,
client that you were interfacing with? Was it the artist with the castle, or was it
so the
the
guy
company?
with the castle is not an artist. He owns the watch brand.
Oh, I thought
He
that was the
hired
artist.
No,
Or I thought
so
he
he
was the artist.
hired um, our client, I guess, as the
Yeah.
curator, and they
Mm.
curated the gallery. So it was him and, I mean, he's probably got a team of people, but him and his manager, I guess. But that was our main point of contact, was with them. We didn't speak to the owners of the castle at all,
I would want to
because
know, man. I would like, who are these people with a castle? Like,
yeah, I
let's
mean,
hang
we
out.
met him. He doesn't speak much English, but he's definitely looks like he owns a castle. Pretty nice. He's a super nice guy though.
That's hilarious. That's cool. Yeah, what a trippy world. That's it's a really, someday, man. Someday I'll own a castle. I swear to God. We should talk in like 20 years. I'll have a castle.
All right, cool. Make a ultimate new media art castle.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Sounds, that would be
Absolutely.
very cool.
Yeah. So how long, when are you going back? Do you know? Do you have like solid plans? You're probably like, get me the hell out of Australia. I can't leave my house.
Yeah, it is a bit of a struggle at the moment. Um, in a few weeks' time, I think I'll go back. Just gotta sort out packing things up here, and then yeah, off we go. There's no real solid plans of what happens when I get there, but I'm already doing some freelance work to sort of keep me going until more projects come up or whatever.
What
Yeah.
kind of freelance work?
I mean, one, I'm building the mechanicals for this weird robot thing. It's like a robot tripod. I can't tell you much about the product, but basically it's like
So it's
a
product work.
tripod thing. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
one's product design / engineering. The other one is also that I'm building like a 3D printer that prints clay.
Oh, cool. For people at that
One of the
radio
makers
station.
there, yeah. And there's some other stuff that might pop up as well with other people there. But
Have you
hopefully
seen
by
those?
that
I mean, I'm
point, I've
sure
got other things. Huh?
you've seen those printers that are doing houses. Like, that's
Yeah,
super fascinating, man. Like, I'm
yeah.
looking at buying property right now, and I'm like looking at like all different ways to build houses. And like, man, like doing a 3D printed house would be so cool,
It would be
because
really cool.
some of the really well designed ones are beautiful. Like, they're
Yeah,
really
yeah, it's
beautiful.
awesome. I
Like,
mean, the textures you can create with those layer lines is amazing. I don't think they've even really started exploring that. The pieces that this person's making in particular are very textured intentionally just by the movements of the printer. You've probably seen similar stuff. And I think you
Yeah.
could apply the same thing to houses. It would be really interesting. So instead of like painting it or whatever, you just give it a texture.
Well, that's very much the style of like the Earthship movement. I don't know if
Yeah.
like what that is. It's a very it comes out of like the 60s, 70s, 80s. They were doing this in Arizona, and
Mm.
essentially it was like using raw materials. They use like a lot of like tires, like tires stacked and then covered with clay, and then they use things like bottles that penetrate through those walls to allow natural light to come in. And
Yeah, gotcha.
but it reminds me, like
Yeah.
the 3D printed houses, that style reminds me of very much of like the Earthship movement. And
Mm.
yeah, with the right architect, you can
Mm.
design some incredibly artistic space
Mm.
using that using those methods.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. It'd be interesting to see what comes out of it. There's
Well,
already
it's
some
kind of the
really
same
awesome little places.
technology. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same technology as what you're
yeah,
describing, like a clay 3D
yeah,
printer. What do they do
yeah.
with a clay 3D printer? Like what are
Uh,
they building with it?
this one's mostly like dinnerware, like cups, plates,
Oh,
bowls,
interesting.
or like carafes and stuff. But I mean, you
Yeah.
can do all sorts of different things. This particular project is based around those items, um, and they're really like beautifully organic and textured. It's really interesting. You get this contrast because it's made very much made by a machine. But once
Yeah.
this thing's all finished, it's hard to tell really. Apart from, I mean, if you look deeper into it, you're like, okay, a human's probably not going to make this. You can't cast this unless you're like rolling out little beads or whatever.
Right.
So you get these really intricate textures and details, and it's quite cool.
So you said you're a Rhino user?
Yeah,
Yeah, Grasshopper, man. I'm like envisioning some parametric, like beautiful parametric sculpture worked into dinnerware. We're just finished a project using like it's a very parametrically designed shape,
yeah.
Grasshopper intensive, and
It
it's
lends
just like
itself really well to it.
I love that shit, man. It's like
Yeah.
that's why I moved from I used to do like lighting for the stage. I was into like show production, and when I started this company, I was like, I want to take the same technology and apply it to like cool shapes, like much
Mm.
cooler structure and sculpture than you can have on stage because you know in the end stages are all truss. It's all the same shapes, sticks
Yeah.
of truss. And with architecture, you can get really creative, both with materials and shape.
Mm.
uh, yeah, it's cool though.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I love
Yeah.
using Rhino for this sort of stuff. I think it's like the ideal program for it. You can just
Yeah.
be super fluid and creative, but then you can also create these insane algorithmically generated forms, or at the same time you can generate a pixel map from that if you need to.
Well, that's actually like where we started using Grasshopper is a way to get pixel locations in 3D out into our
Yeah,
mapping software. And
yeah.
yeah,
We
it's
did
a
that for
definite
a few times in
weapon of
Morph,
choice.
actually.
That's how you mapped Morph. Is that what you said?
Essentially, so we've got a map for, it's basically just like a CSV file for the nodes, so the central
Yeah.
point, but also so the panels have about 150 LEDs in them, and each of them are addressable. We're not addressing them at the moment because I haven't written that sort of pipeline,
Wait,
but
so each of the hexagons has 150 pixels?
yeah,
Holy
all
shit, man, they're
addressable.
so
Yeah,
dense. What
yeah.
density is the using strip?
It's about 10 mil. So there's a 30 mil-ish sort of gap between the pixel and the diffuser, and that's what gives it its really nice flat look.
You must be using like 144 pixel per meter. Like, yeah, you said it's 10 millimeter distance between pixels?
Yeah. So they're
What size
custom.
pixels? What size
So
pixels are you
they're
using?
50/50 pixels.
Oh, there's 50/50s.
Yeah.
So the pretty big pixels.
Yeah, yeah. So it was like a balance between the pixel density and the diffuser distance.
Yep.
So I was just, basically I'd written a script to fill the panels with the pixels because it's quite hard to get. None of the shapes are symmetrical. Essentially, they're all like a bit like of a squashed hexagon. So we actually built 9 different LED panels, all unique.
Oh wow.
And those pixel layouts are generated in Grasshopper, so that you get like a nice evenly distributed spiral within the panel. Um, and yeah, you can individually address them, and we've got basically, if you know a panel type and its location, we've also got CSV files for that panel type, so you can know where every single pixel is on that type of panel and its orientation.
So you backlit those. That's right. I was thinking, like in my mind, I was envisioning like a ring of pixels around the outside of the hexagon, but you're not doing that.
Yeah,
You're actually, you made a panel in the back. That actually makes more sense. Like,
yeah.
how the hell do you cram 150 pixels into the perimeter of one of those hexagons? They're so small.
Oh
But
no, no, yeah, they're custom panels. I
yeah,
should have one with me, but I don't have it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it was a super tedious process laying them all out in KiCad, but I mean, it ended up being that you have this super, super smooth, diffused surface and you can't see any pixels,
how hard
which
would it
makes
be
it.
to scale that?
How
Like
hard
if
would
you
it be
wanted to
to.
make if you wanted to make a smaller or a bigger diameter sphere,
Yeah,
how hard would it be to scale that?
not that hard. I mean, going smaller is harder, kind of super tightly packed as it is now.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, the only thing you have to change is the outer panel. The rest of it can be used almost as is. I mean, we'd probably make different changes based on what we've learned, but the whole thing is designed to be scaled, and that's one of the reasons we chose Ethernet in the end, because you can just scale things up and add add switches, add networks, and then
Yeah.
there's no like distance requirement either. Like you could make this thing the size of a building with the same number of panels, and it would still work. You just need bigger motors.
Yeah, well, good luck finding that client.
I'd love to.
I would like a building made out of articulated kinetic
Oh yeah. One of
hexagon
my
panels.
pipe dream concepts at the moment is like this whole experience, like massive warehouse sort of room that you go into, and there's like this sentient morph that roams about doing its own thing.
Man, one of my first years at Burning Man, there were these robots, and it was like an aluminum sphere made out of bands of metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow they were able to like swing a mass around inside to make it roll forward or roll back. They could make it like roll in 360 degrees, and they made a fleet of these things, man. And
Sweet.
they just let them loose, and they could perceive, they could like do basic perception of their environment, like, oh, there's something here, I'm going to move the other way, and they literally just like let them loose on the playa, and she just rolled around. It was really cool, man. It was like, yeah, it was very impressive, and it was impressive and creative at the same time. And it was back in like 2010, 2011. It's a while ago.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. If we could find like, if technology allowed like a super power dense battery that was mega lightweight, it would be awesome to like pack all the power into the center of this sphere and then have it roll under its own power. Because
Yeah,
if you push the actuators, theoretically you can propel the ball.
sure.
If everything
You'd
was
have to make
built
those things
solidly
really
enough.
durable, really
Yeah.
fucking durable. You know, if you're gonna have those things rolling around the floor, you know.
Mm.
So you know, it'd be cool. I was actually thinking about taking what you've built and actually unfolding it into like a waveform surface that could be
Mm.
hung, and that would be super sexy. You know what I mean? Like a ceiling,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
essentially, or some kind of canvas that I mean. White Void did something similar. If you look at their website, they did it with OLED panels, and I
Yep,
don't think it was kinetic.
I've
The
actually
one that
seen
they
it.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, but doing something like that would be really
yeah,
compelling. It's very cool.
yeah. That
It'd
would be
probably be
cool.
easier too because there wouldn't be so much packed electronics. It wouldn't be like all wrapped into a sphere.
Yeah, planar stuff is definitely far simpler to package. The probably the most difficult aspect of the project is the fact that it's a sphere, and that was one of the original reasons I made it. Because as I said, I was making this node. That was the design, just this single element, and I had a bunch of ideas to apply it to different shapes and surfaces to demonstrate the flexibility of the system. And the ultimate test for that, to me, was the sphere. So that's why I ended up choosing the sphere
Yeah.
because it was the most difficult way of doing it.
So was it your concept?
Yeah,
Did you create that concept?
yeah.
And did that come out of your, like, were you thinking about this 6 years ago when you were in your course, your electronics class? You're like, I want to do, like, did you have that concept? It just evolved?
I wasn't as developed at that stage, but I was thinking. I mean, one of the earliest uh, projects I was working on was it was just literally a rendered concept of digital clay. I think I was frustrated with learning CAD at the time. We would have been quite early into that process, but something that you could mold and shape, and then in real time have that model show up on your computer, so you like free from for a model in physical space. So that
Hmm.
was like one of the seeds for it. But then I was uh, sort of on separate tangents looking at this kinetic stuff. Um, and I guess, yeah, I mean, it sort of just like evolved into this thing. It wasn't just like a light bulb moment. I'm making a kinetic sphere or anything,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was definitely like a set a path through this sort of like going through this rabbit hole, being fascinated by kinetic elements and lights. And I actually wasn't even going to illuminate it at one point. It was more important to me to make these fluid textural shapes,
Yeah.
but the lighting sort of
It's
came
so
later.
much cooler. Man, the way that the light and the motion play together.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to the guys who did the programming
Yeah,
because
you
it's
should
like,
definitely get on a chat with them. They're super interesting to chat with.
yeah, I mean, introduce us at some point, but it's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
the way that they created motion that responds and combines naturally with the brightness of those
Yeah.
like you watch it and you're like, the brightness is also the extrusion distance from the center. It makes so much sense, like when you look at it, you're just like, it visually,
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. And that sort of that the way of treating it came from my project originally. One of the earliest things I was driving was this tiny nine sort of pixel array. Well, it wasn't even pixels at that point. And then using a processing sketch to drive it with a luminosity of pixels.
Yeah.
But then these guys have taken it to like many levels beyond that, and it's like the ultimate application of it.
So would you work on a project that's not kinetic?
I mean, I've worked on other projects that aren't kinetic before. It's definitely more fascinating for me, but working out the mechanics of it, but also I mean, just the systems behind even LED arrays are interesting to me,
Yeah.
and the build process. I mean, the more free form or challenging the build is, the more interesting it is for me.
We're working with this crew right now. They're called O2 Treehouses, and we've got this client. He's kind of like a crypto dude. All of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I'm rich, holy shit. And the tree, like, if you look up O2 Treehouses, man, like
Okay.
they make these. It's essentially like a buckyball where every hexagon is a window and it hangs in the trees. So it's like this glass fucking buckyball. And what we're doing is we're illuminating the vertices of that buckyball,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just a really, really cool lighting project, and it's the thing that we're building, man, is it's nuts. It's like one of a kind. Um, it's going
Nice.
to be
That
a
sounds super
really,
cool.
yeah, it's a really, really cool. And they're here in the Bay too, man. They're in Oakland. They're out of a warehouse called American Steel, which is where a lot of big Burning Man art is out of.
Hmm.
But this project like popped up, and now all of a sudden it's in like full gear, and we're just like, you know, putting this together in the next month or so. But it's a really cool design.
Nice. Well, if you need help with spherical LED patterns, the MindBuffer guys are certainly,
Yeah, well, I
I
was
would
thinking about
say.
that. I think we've got like there's another group that's doing patterns. Doing they have a light engine that I'm curious to work with on this one.
Mm,
But I told you about this other chandelier that we're doing. It's like a chandelier, but it's not a chandelier. It's like an entire fucking 2-room array of hanging pendants. It was supposed to be kinetic, but
hmm.
it just didn't work. Like it's not going to work as a kinetic piece, but we're still creating a really cool waveform shape. It's all generated in Grasshopper. I'll show you pictures of it later. But there are hundreds of hanging strands of LEDs, so it's a volumetric piece,
Hmm.
and it would be interesting to talk to both sides of your crew. Like we've already talked about it a little bit. It'd be cool to work with you on the electromechanical aspects, but I would love to talk to them about how their system could be used to generate volumetric light patterns.
Yeah,
So
man,
three-dimensional light patterns.
it's the bread and butter. I would
Yeah,
say
yeah,
they're the people to talk to about it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a ways off. It's like
Yeah, yeah, sure.
it's in concepting phase. We're just doing the design, but yeah, it'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be
Either way,
awesome.
man, like I would, yeah, we just need to talk like outside of the podcast, blah blah blah. It's like there's so many cool projects, man, and like I've got, looking at the work that you've done, it's like my mind just lights up with ideas. I'm
Yeah,
like
nice.
fuck, it's really
Yeah, I mean, I'm
cool.
always super keen to collaborate with people. I think it's an awesome way to develop new ideas, and meeting other people doing the same thing is also always awesome.
Well, I mean that's like
It's like half the
I
reason I do it, I think.
yeah, that's how that is definitely the reason that one of the reasons that I'm so into light art is the community. It
Yeah.
is, like I love talking to other light artists. I love, like the idea, how like talking to people generates new ideas, and
Mm,
and just, the it's the same way with like how a tool can inform your art. It's like the creative
yeah.
environment that you're in informs your art.
Yeah, and it's amazing because it's art, but it's super super technical, and there are a lot of mega talented and smart people out there. Like the systems we're creating for these things are like on a crazy scale of complexity,
Yeah,
all
well,
for
that
art.
that's the
There's
that's the
like
world that we live in.
yeah,
Is like the world of creative engineering, and
yeah, and
that's
that's like the pinnacle engineering sort of stuff. Sometimes,
yeah. Well, I mean,
sometimes it's quite crude, but also at the same time, it can be like super super refined and well done. It's quite amazing.
yeah, man. Well, look, science progresses through creativity,
Yeah.
right? It's like, like that's what they say about Einstein. He was like more of an artist, and you know what I mean. Like he was like, yes, he was a great physicist, but he was really a fucking artist,
Mm,
and that's what pushes boundaries. And I think that
yeah.
that could not be truer of any like industry or any practice.
Hmm.
People who push boundaries are artists because they're using their creativity to do things that has not been done.
Hmm.
And every time technology progresses, that opens up new doors creatively. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you can take that new capability, and you can be creative with it. And that's like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the most exciting thing about it to me. I wish I was it's something I wish I'd learnt in school. Because I probably, if I had known that like this is the cool sort of stuff you can create with science and maths and all of these, things that are most of the time super bland when taught in the classroom.
Yeah.
If it had been a different approach, I would have been so much more engaged during school because I mean, it's a way better way to learn these things and to even apply them.
So I went to a school that was like teaching creative technology, but the professors were not that creative. And I feel
Yeah.
like it takes, well, it takes a certain type of personality
Mm,
to learn a technical skill and be creative with it. Creativity is like a slider on your personality. It's like some people, that slider is pegged at 100, and most of the time it's just somewhere, like whatever. And I think that somebody who has intrinsic creativity in their personality will go and learn a technical skill, and they'll want to do creative things with it. And then some
yeah.
people are motivated just by like learning a skill and making a paycheck, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Like I,
Yeah.
I feel like the vast majority of people, super talented engineers, their satisfaction comes from solving very complex problems. I have that in me. Like I love a technical challenge, but I want to also do things. I want to do new things, and I want to be creative with it. And I think that's like most of our peers share that.
Yeah. And I think even like the the best of the best engineers must have that creative slider up pretty high because you just can't come up with new and innovative solutions without it. Maybe they didn't
Yeah.
go through the artistic pathway, but I think like deep down when you're hitting the top and you're the most in demand sort of engineering wise, you have to have had that like creative drive to think of these new applications for whatever super mundane thing you're thinking about at the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is what separates like the best in any industry is the ability
Yeah,
to think outside the box
yeah.
and
I
to be
think it
creative.
sometimes. I mean, maybe it's changing now, but I think like that slider you're talking about could be set a lot higher for a lot more people early on if the value for that creativity was fostered a bit more. Um, but I mean,
Well, I
it's
mean,
like these archaic
then you're
systems in
getting into
place.
then you're like really that conversation kind of slides into like stable society is based on people doing predictable things, right? And I think that like it is though, and
Yeah,
like it takes a very stable society in order for that society to allow people to think outside the box, because thinking outside the
yeah,
box
yeah.
can create
Getcha.
instability, and that is threatening to people in power, right?
Yeah,
So you have like these liberal democracies where art thrives, and then you have societies that are really focused on control where they actively discourage art, and that might contribute to a stable society, but I really think it holds those societies back from pushing the boundaries. And yeah, I mean that's like, that's we see that right now throughout the world. Like there are societies that are fucking amazing at building the same thing, right?
yeah.
And then there are societies which are like pushing the boundaries, and those are places where people are freer to be artistic.
Mm, yeah, super interesting.
It
I
is,
think
man.
sometimes that may flip as well because those same people that are just like copying and making the same thing are obviously becoming very wealthy from it, and then that society almost can have more freedom now.
Yeah.
So then their creativity can kind of shift back there. I think we'll see some awesome things coming from that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm never going to be a bazillionaire, and it's okay,
Yeah,
because I am an artist, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
an that is not rewarded with bazillions.
No,
Not really,
no.
but it's okay, man, because like I am so fulfilled. And I think that most of the artist friends that I have are in the same boat. It's like, I could go and fucking work as a project manager for some, whatever, or I could do a lot of things and make a lot more dollar points. But in the end, I'm not going to do that. I'm just not.
Yeah.
You got to make the trade off, it's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who does this is definitely smart enough to do any number of different, very high-paying jobs. But like you said,
Yeah.
it's not rewarding at all. I'm happy to
Yeah.
cough up that pay that money to do cooler stuff to be a bit more fulfilled. Yeah.
Well, it's cool. It's cool seeing what you guys have done. It's really inspiring, and it's yeah, just
Thanks.
definitely want to keep in touch, and hopefully we can work together. That'd be really
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool. I'm gonna call it. It's been like almost 2 fucking hours, man. It's been a good
Holy shit.
conversation. I know. Yeah, thanks again for doing this. Let's just keep in touch, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll hook you up with the MindBuffer guys too. That'll be a really interesting chat for you.
I'm gonna email you after this, man. Like tomorrow
Yeah.
or something. Like we need to have another conversation. Like I have specific things I want to talk to you about in like, projects in the next like number of months where I'm just like, you guys should be part of this. So let's
Yeah,
let's
cool, man.
talk.
Happy to chat.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
Yep, bye.